Hi, welcome back to the XII Sound channel and part 2 in the series all about my Project 12 modular synth. In this particular video we're going to be looking at the AS3340 voltage controlled oscillator, which is a VCO that actually follows the 1 volt per octave standard. When I built this, I felt that I needed to move to build oscillators that follow that standard. With experience of both building and playing these synths, I'm not sure I'd put the same level of importance on having the 1 volt per octave standard. Yes, it's useful. Yes, particularly if you're going to start using commercial controllers. Later on I'll be demonstrating this VCO using a key step controller, which obviously follows the 1 volt per octave standard, so it all fits in. So yeah, I'm not dismissing it. It is important. It is an industry standard. And in actual fact, the 3340 chip, a little bit of history for you. The original one was a Curtis 3340 CEM 3340, and it's a dedicated voltage controlled oscillator chip designed specifically for use in analog synthesizers. And in actual fact, the Curtis chip could be found in quite a number of commercial synths from the early 80s. They went out of production for a while, but they are available again now. But also there are clones of the Curtis chips, and there's a clone of the 3340. So instead of a CEM 3340, what I've used in this module is one of the clones, and it's labelled AS3340. It is a clone of the Curtis chip. It has all the same functions. The wiring diagrams all look exactly the same. The main difference is that the clones are about half the price of the Curtis chips. And being as how I've got plenty of time but not a lot of money, I opted for the cheaper version. And yeah, it works. Whether there's any performance differences between the two chips, I don't know, because I've not built anything with the Curtis chip and I don't own anything with the Curtis chip, so I couldn't say. I'm sure that there'll be plenty of opinions out there on the web if you really want to go and have a look at that. But all I'm concerned about is building a 1 volt per octave VCO that actually works in my system, and as you will hear, the AS3340 does just that. The design I've used is actually from the Look Mum No Computer website, and I'll put a link in the description to that. It's a very good article, really easy instruction to follow. So what we're going to be looking at is basically Sam's circuit. So yeah, let's move over to the bench. We'll have a look at the module, look at what the controls are, look at what the circuit looks like, and then we'll have a listen to what it actually sounds like when you play it. Well, this is the panel of the AS3340 VCO. You notice it's a double width panel. That's because I'm going to flip it over. You'll see it's the size of the circuit board on the bike. I want to kind of mount it flat against the panel, so I want to use a double width. So let's have a quick look at the controls. There's very few controls on the outside of the panel. The control level pitch, that's actually a coarse tune control. Now this can be tuned. It can be tuned to run a chromatic scale. It's the 1 volt. That's the whole point about the 1 volt per octave. And as I said earlier, it's very useful. But I also said earlier that I'm not as kind of hung up about chasing the 1 volt per octave. When I make the next video in this series, I'll be looking at the other VCOs in in Project 12, and I'll talk a little bit more about working with linear VCOs that don't follow that standard. But anyway, digressing. This one is a 1 volt per octave. So when you're kind of tuning with the pitch, what you really want to be doing is setting the coarse tune. We'll have a look at what the other tuning controls are when we flip the board over. The other control that's up here is pulse width. So you've got the 3 outputs, and when you're on the pulse output, what the pulse width control does is it will move the leading and trailing edges of the pulse wave, so alter the width, and therefore alters the timbre of the sound. There's a CV input which will control the pitch, so this is where you inject your 1 volt per octave and get your tuned keyboard going. There's a modulation input for the pulse width and a pulse width modulation control. Pulse width modulation control really just adjusts the CV level that's going into the modulation input. And then you've got the 3 different waveform outputs. So the chip provides you with, in this configuration, a sawtooth output, triangle wave output, and a pulse output, which gives you that kind of raspy square wave kind of sound. So what does the circuit board actually look like? Well, probably not as scary as you might think. What I'll do, I'll flip it that way, because then we can actually see the layout as laid out. As I said, I followed the instructions on the Look Mum No Computer website, and this is the layout that Sam put on there. The big chip at the top, that's the AS3340. You could use the Curtis CAM3340 if you're feeling affluent. And yeah, it's a dedicated VCO chip made for synthesizers. The 2 chips down here are op-amp chips, and they're used for conditioning the kind of the voltage input that sets the pitch level, and also buffering the outputs from the 3 waveforms. We talked about these are obviously the sockets for that's pitch CV, modulation CV, and the various waveforms. The pots are, oops, put it out of the screen, the pots are on the back there. Power input there. The other control that you need when you are tuning one of these circuits is, not only do you need to set the pitch with the coarse control on the back, but on the original design there was a this was just a bog standard preset potentiometer, and I was twiddling away for quite a while, and what this does, it sets the tracking across the voltage ranges, so as you go across each octave it will stay in tune. I was struggling a little bit with setting it with the basic preset pot, so what I did, I used a multi-term pot to give me a little bit more fine adjustment. I'm going to be honest, I still find it a bit of a challenge to tune this thing, and the other thing as well is that as it warms up it drifts out of tune, so you really need to kind of check it, tune it each time round. It's not as unstable as you might think, and within the parameters that you would normally use it, and yeah, but if you're going to be kind of recording against other instruments that are either acoustic instruments or they are tuned to the 1 volt per octave standard, then then you need to kind of take a bit of time to set it up. As I said, this is the Luckman No Computer design, and yeah, it works and it's great, and you'll hear what the output sounds like. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it at all. There are other variations on this design out there. One of the things that I would follow is I've seen some people put a fine tune actually on the outside, and bearing in mind that you do have to go and tune it reasonably regularly if you want to kind of be more precise, then you really ought to have it on some control on the outside and not keep having to unscrew the panel and working from the back there. The other thing that I've seen is that some people have there's a facility for putting FM input into the 3340 chip, and I've seen designs that have used that option. So yeah, you can. The thing about the chip is it's there. It's an oscillator, a dedicated oscillator. You can set it up to tune it, and it will produce up to 3 waveforms, as you will hear. But you can configure it to do pretty much whatever you want it to do within those parameters. So you don't have to follow this design. There are other designs out there. I just chose this one because, like I say, there was some really good clear instructions on the website. There's a nice YouTube video where Sam gives a demonstration of this thing, and yeah, it sounds pretty good. So having said that, let's go and have a listen to what it does sound like. For this demonstration, I'm using the key step controller, and the CV out from the key step is going to the CV in on the AS3340. The output from 3340 and put it into the Sawtooth is coming out and going into the input on a Vactrol VCA. The output from the VCA is going into the mixer, and then out from the mixer to be recorded. So there's no filtration, there's no processing. It's what you're going to hear is simply the sound of the trigger. The gate out on the key step is triggering the CV on the Vactrol. So basically it's working on as I hit a key, it'll trigger the Vactrol. There we go. So you're gonna hear what they all sound like. I was hoping to be able to show you what they sounded like as well, but I've discovered some slightly dodgy connections on my oscilloscope, which I need to sort out. Once I've got that sorted out, I will make a video showing what these waveforms look like. However, it's a synth, it's meant to be heard, not so much seen. So what we're going to do, we're going to hear what each of the waveforms actually sound like. So we're starting off, this is the Sawtooth waveform. There we go, and drop it down an octave on the transpose key. So there you go, very quick, very simple demonstration, but you can hear. That's the basic Sawtooth sound that comes out of the 3340. Now, I'm not touching anything else. All I'm doing, I'm taking the output from the Sawtooth and moving it across and putting it into the triangle wave. So here we go, triangle wave. Oh, 2 things. First of all, it sounds like a typical triangle wave, got that nice smooth sound to it. But also you will notice that the output level has dropped quite a lot. Now, one of the features of the 3340 is that each of the waveforms has a different output level. So what you need to do, you need to compensate for that in your mixer. So if I just turn it up a little bit, so there we go. Classic triangle wave sound from the 3340. Like I said, this is just a quick demo. If we go into the pulse waveform output, and I've got a control on the top. When we looked at the panel, we can see we've got the control for pulse width there. I've got it set around about the centre. I better turn this back down again, because what you're going to hear is a much stronger output from the pulse width. So it's mostly the triangle wave that has the biggest drop. You're going to have to compensate for. But so this is the pulse width. So yeah, it's kind of nice pulse, square wave type, raspy sound. But if I demonstrate what the altering the pulse width does, if I hold the key down and turn it in one direction, so I've turned the pulse width control clockwise from the centre, come back down, take it to the centre, turn it anti-clockwise, and back to the centre again. Okay, all very interesting. So you can actually shape that sound as you like. So you get some nice variations on the sound. But also, one of the features we've got on this is we have a pulse width modulation input and a control pulse width modulation control, which basically is just controlling the CV level going into the modulation. Classically, what you would do, you probably modulate this with an LFO. So I'm going to use the LFO on my Project 9, and I'm going to inject a square wave low frequency oscillator that's actually running quite quick at the moment, but I'm going to inject that into pulse width modulation. So if I hold the key down, now at the moment I've got the CV turned down. If I bring the CV level up, change the speed. What I also have on the LFO is the ability to go from square wave to triangle wave output. So let's try that. Almost a Leslie effect when you do that. But of course, you couldn't play organ chords. It's monophonic. But yeah, you still get a nice sound. I mean, if we stick an arpeggio going. So, well, there you go. It's a very basic demonstration. I mean, you can kind of modulate the pulse width with all sorts of things. I've used envelope generators and other oscillators to just kind of, it's modular. You can plug anything into anything else and just see what happens. So it's, yeah, lots of fun. And there you go. We have a voltage controlled oscillator that conforms to the 1 volt per octave standard if you feel that's necessary. And all I did, I just followed the instructions on the Look Mum No Computer website. Very good, very clear instructions, and built myself a 1 volt per octave VCO. So if I can do it, then I'm sure you can. So go on, have a go, build your own.